Well, good morning. It's warming up. Does it feel like it's warming up a bit? The body's all nice and close. I wanted just a quick question about heroes, who our heroes are. Has anyone got any heroes? Yeah.
Shazam?
Shazam's a hero, yeah.
Ant-Man?
Ant-Man's a hero. Yeah. Any other heroes? Mummy's a hero, yes. Don't forget to say Mum's a hero. What about any Bible heroes?
Samuel?
Samuel's a hero, yeah. Love your hair, by the way. God. She got it. That was the answer I was looking for. When you read the Bible, it's really easy to think that King David was the hero, or the prophet Samuel, Moses, the hero. Then we get to the New Testament. Of course, Paul was a hero, Luke, Jesus. We did get Jesus. And Jesus, and we just sang it, Jesus is God. And so the hero of the Bible is God, the Creator. Now, I always wonder about heroes. What sort of person, what sort of hero is it? I mean, Ant-Man, pretty small hero. Shazam, well, pretty fast, yeah.
Well, he was a great god.
A Greek god, yeah. Shazam, the Greek god. Or Superman would be really strong. Spider-Man, what sort of hero is Spider-Man? Freaky. I know what he does, or what sort of, if he's a superhero, but the thing about Spider-Man, he's always cracking jokes. He's always just being really annoying. It's a sort of, not that cracking jokes is annoying. Batman, we know he's very serious. I'm Batman. So when it comes to type of hero that God is, we want to know what the character, what's God like? What's the characteristics of God like? And do you know what people do? What people do is they imagine what God's like. And they think about things and they go, well, God must be like this. And we project, we say, God is like this. And we basically tell God what God's like. And, we don't often get it right. There is this passage in the Bible where God says, this is what I'm like. And this passage from Exodus chapter 34, verse 6 and 7 is apparently, I haven't actually checked this, but apparently is the most quoted verses throughout the rest of the Bible. So parts of it are being repeated like a refrain all through the Bible. And so I thought, if this is true, well, we should actually think about that and we should read it. So the person who is going to read it today isn't here. So I was wondering if there's anyone who wants to read it. I've got it written up here. Thank you, Carolyn.
Exodus 34, 6-7. Yahweh, Yahweh, a God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. He maintains loyal love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he won't declare innocent the guilty. He will bring the iniquities of the fathers upon the children and grandchildren to the third and the fourth generation.
Whoa. Can you put it back to the first? Yahweh, Yahweh. So Yahweh is God's name. So we call God God, and we call God Lord, we call God Creator, we call God Jesus. But when Moses said, "What's your name?" he said, "My name is Yahweh." Except we actually don't know how to say it, because it was just 4 characters and it's been forgotten. So sometimes it said Jehovah, sometimes Yahweh. It's like calling Peter Peter rather than just mate. Mate, there you go, mate. That's like the God, that's like hey God. But if you want to say, hey Peter, we would say, hey Yahweh. That's the personal name of God. So personal name of God, a God compassionate, 5 things here. Compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. So we're going to do a bit of a brief overview of that today, the whole thing, including the next verses. But then next week, we're going to look at compassionate and gracious. What does that mean, those characteristics? And then the following week, we're going to look at this one about anger. So I'm sure you have questions about that, particularly about the following verses. And then we're going to look at the loyal love and faithfulness. So that's our plan for the next 4 weeks. Okay? But why God reveals all that is because God was dealing with the Israelites. You might remember the story where there was a golden kookaburra that the Israelites made. No? What did they make? A golden calf. That's right. Calf, kookaburra. They made a golden calf. 2, yeah. So they just got the 10 Commandments. And the first commandment said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, mind, strength. The first one is love God alone. And the first thing they did was make some other gods. They made some idols. And so in God's frustration, he was going to take them out. Moses interceded, and then God says, you know what? Let me tell you what I'm really like. I'm actually compassionate and gracious. I'm slow to get angry, and I'm abounding in loyal love and faithfulness. So I'm actually not going to wipe you out. I'm going to look after you. So I just want to, as we introduce this, the theme of the character of God today, we're going to go into it more in the following 3 weeks, okay? But the biggest stumbling block maybe for you as you hear this passage is around sin, transgression, and iniquity. So if you want, can you just bring up that slide that says that you'll forgive our sin, transgression, and iniquity. So in the midst of the passage, it says, God says, he maintains loyal love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, forgiving transgression, and forgiving sin. Now, the whole point of this revealing of God's character is the tension that exists in the whole Bible story. How does a faithful, loyal, loving God deal with rebellious people? Because people keep rebelling. And as we heard at the beginning, this passage comes like hours after the people had rebelled. They got the 10 Commandments and rebelled almost straight away. So what does God do with that? Well, there's this tension in his character, that he's compassionate and gracious, exhibits loyal love and faithfulness, and then in the midst of it is this slow to anger. How do I deal, God says, with iniquity, transgression, and sin? So I just wanted to help us by defining those 3 words, because those 3 words are different. So if you want to bring out the pictures. So the first one is sin. Sin is the word kata in Hebrew or hamartia in Greek. Basically means falling short. It's when you miss the mark. It's when you don't measure up. That's the word for sin. It's used in different versions when they were training the soldiers to use their slingshots to hit the jar or to be able to knock down a giant. If you missed, it was hamartia. It was when you fall short. That's the word that we translate as sin. The next word that we translate transgression is the breaking of trust. And the great image I heard of this is that if someone breaks into your house and steals your stuff, well, that's wicked on their heart. That's the next word. That's iniquity, when they've done something that's crooked. But when it's your neighbor that breaks in and steals your stuff, that's transgression. That's like breaking of trust. That's like worse, isn't it? It's why when a family member or a friend transgresses or does something against you, it's just worse than if a stranger did it. So that's what this word here is capturing, this transgression when trust is broken. And the third word, which is translated as iniquity, is wickedness, is crookedness. It's when evil is said to be good and good is said to be evil. This is the bad stuff, and there are consequences for this. And so in this passage, when God says, I will forgive the sin, the transgression, and iniquity, it's I forgive like the whole, every different way that you can imagine that there's brokenness in the relationship. Now that has that verse, if you just take me to the last part of the verse where it says, I'll bear the iniquity. I will bring the iniquities onto the father, upon the children and grandchildren, to the third and the fourth. And it actually doesn't say the word generation. We're going to talk more about this in a few weeks' time. But just to hold it, this is intention to, I will pour out loving faithfulness on the thousands, but the iniquity, that's when there is wickedness. The wickedness, when wickedness occurs, there's consequences. And if the children maintain the wickedness, there's consequences, and there's consequences and consequences. But as we see through the book of Kings and Samuel and Kings, Chronicles, it usually there's someone who finds faith again. It's usually only 2 or 3 generations, and then they repent and turn back. So this is what that's about. It's not that the consequences of my rebellion is poured out on my kids, because we know from other passages that God does not do that. The sins of the fathers are not held against the children. But if the children follow the way of the father, then they too will bear the consequences of that. So there's a little bit of, we'll have to talk a lot more about that. What I want to show you now is the Bible Project. I think I said in the newsletter last week, I've been watching a lot of these. I just love it. And if you are a visual learner, this is gift upon gift. If you're auditory, then you can deal with sermons. If you're a reader, you just prefer just to go to your room and just read it yourself. But this is for us who are visual learners. And so maybe some of the graphics will be helpful. If you like structure, this will be helpful. It goes for 6 minutes. I'll send the links out to you. So I hope it's helpful as a way of introducing this series, building on what we've just been saying. So thanks.
The Bible is a collection of many ancient Israelite scrolls, and together they're telling one unified story.
Now, if you look at the second scroll, Exodus, you'll find 2 important sentences. They're actually so important that they're referenced and re-quoted over 20 more times within the Bible itself.
It must be important. What does it say?
Yahweh, Yahweh, that's God's name, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness.
I can see why it's repeated so often. These attributes of God are really lovely.
And the statement goes on. He maintains loyal love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he won't declare innocent the guilty. He will bring the iniquities of the fathers upon the children and grandchildren to the third and the fourth.
Okay, hold on. This last part takes a bit of a turn. We're first talking about God's love, and suddenly it's about his judgment on grandkids. So, is God merciful or vengeful?
Yeah, great question. Let's see these words in a larger context by looking at something important in Genesis, the first scroll of the Bible. There, God chooses one family, the Israelites, from among the nations, and he promises that he's going to rescue the whole world through this family somehow.
And Genesis ends with the family of Abraham in Egypt.
Then the book of Exodus begins, and this book has two large movements.
Right, okay, so this first movement of Exodus, God rescues Israel from slavery in Egypt.
And in the second movement, God leads them to Mount Sinai, where they camp out for a year. And God invites this whole nation into a partnership called a covenant, so that they can be shaped by his values and character.
And represent God to all the other nations.
Exactly. Now, this whole Mount Sinai movement in Exodus can be broken up into 4 literary units. First, there's the actual ceremony where the Israelites agree to be God's partners. And God sets up the terms of the relationship, starting with the 10 commandments. The first 2 are,
don't give your allegiance to other gods, and don't make any idol images of God. Seems simple enough.
After that, God shows Moses detailed blueprints for building this sacred home so that God can come and live among them.
Oh, right, and then comes a really long narrative about the building of that sacred home.
But you missed something. Right in between these sections is the story that has our description about God's character. The story begins with Moses going up on the mountain, writing down the partner agreement, as the Israelites are at the base of the mountain, violating the first 2 commands.
That's ridiculous. They're breaking the covenant vows while the ceremony is still going on.
Yes. And so God is hurt and angry, and he warns Moses that this betrayal will keep on happening. God is ready to call it quits.
But what about his promise to rescue the world through them?
Yeah, exactly. This is what Moses brings up. And so, what is God going to do? Should he end the partnership, which would be fair?
Or will he be faithful to his promise to Abraham and show them mercy?
Yeah, exactly. Now, look back at the words that we began with, and you'll see they're about this very tension between God's mercy and his justice.
Okay, so the statement opens like this: a God compassionate and gracious.
In Hebrew, this line has 3 words that rhyme. El Rahum V'Chanun. And the line overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness matches the first, as it also has 3 Hebrew words. Rav Chesed V'Emet.
Each of those lines have 2 attributes of God, and they surround a 5th attribute, that God is slow to anger.
Right. Now, that's the first half of this description of God. Then comes the second half. God maintains loyal love for thousands. And how is he going to remain loyal to people who keep rebelling against him? By forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin.
But God's forgiveness doesn't mean people can just do whatever they want.
Right. God's mercy is balanced in what follows. Yet he won't declare innocent the guilty. He'll bring the iniquities of the fathers upon the children and grandchildren to the third and the fourth.
The third and the fourth what?
Well, it's referring to generations of people who repeat their ancestors' rebellion against God. They'll get what they deserve. But notice, this small number of generations contrasts that massive number up above.
God's loyal love to thousands.
Right. And then check this out. God's forgiveness of iniquity in this line is contrasted with his justice on iniquity in this line.
Okay, and all those lines are surrounding a central line here about God's justice. He will not declare innocent the guilty. So while God is slow to anger, he is also just.
Right. This is the tension that these 2 sentences are exploring. How does a faithful and loyal God deal with such a rebellious people? This is the challenge God faces in this story And it's the same challenge he faces in the whole biblical story as he works to rescue the world through this family.
With that in mind, we can take a closer look at these 5 attributes that God declares about himself to Moses. A God compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness.
And we'll see how each one leads us deeper into the character of God and into the story of the Bible.
Okay, there endeth the introduction. So next week, we'll look at compassionate and gracious.